Hello, and welcome to episode 14 of Public Interest Podcast with your host, Jordan Cooper, where we interview politicians, activists, and advocates, and others who improve the state of the world. We're here today with Cy Atlas in Bethesda, Maryland, who is the former treasurer of the Montgomery County Democratic Central Committee, which is the party apparatus in Montgomery County, Maryland. How are you doing today, Cy?
Hi, Jordan. Doing great.
Excellent. So the first question I'd like to pose to you today is, what are you currently doing, or what have you ever done in your life to advance the public interest, and why?
Well, I guess it goes back a number of years. I was always in business and really became active in an organization called Maccabi USA, which is this was 1975. Maccabi USA is for a better term, is the Jewish Olympics. It's held every 4 years in Israel after the World Olympics, and it involves athletes from Jewish athletes from anywhere in the world. And so I was involved in that. And that's how I really first became interested in public service and in philanthropy.
Really? Were you an athlete yourself?
No, I was a wannabe. Played
a wannabe Maccabee.
A wannabe athlete. Played a little basketball in high school. Grew up in Washington, D.C. Went to Roosevelt High School, 13th and Upshur, University of Maryland.
Yeah.
And after the Air Force, I went into a family business, which was sporting goods, Atlas Sports Store, which I sold in 1973 to W.R. Grace, and it became part of Herman's World of Sporting Goods. But after I retired in 1987, Grace sold off all of its retail operations. My wife, who had been involved in politics in Montgomery County as a assistant precinct chair and then a precinct chair, precinct 715, which is...
and for our listeners, what is a precinct?
A precinct is a geographic grouping of homes that vote at a specific voting place. In our case, it was a Powell Middle School was the voting place, and in our precinct there's about 4,000 people in that particular geographic location, Democrats, Republicans, and declines, and it really just designates the voting place.
And so what would a chair do?
Well, the chair would be the person who would organize the volunteers to come out on election day, to give out literature, to talk about the candidates, to hold coffees or teas for candidates in their precinct, to do fundraising for the party, for the Democratic Party in Montgomery County, and for candidates. It's really the boots on the ground person for the candidates.
So just as an aside to listeners right now, precinct officials are typically associated with party organizations. So you might have precinct 711 with a chair and vice chair for the Democratic Party, and precinct 711, the same precinct, would have a chair and vice chair potentially for the Republican Party or any other organization. So it's a means of organizing within the party infrastructure. So
I think you put it better than I could.
Okay, so sorry.
The only thing I did want to say, though, I kept saying that they would work for the candidates. The precinct chair, vice chair do not work for the candidates during the primary. They're nonpartisan in the primary as far as their party candidates are concerned.
Right.
They only take a position of working for the specific candidate who has won the primary and is going forward into the general election.
And why is that they wouldn't take a stance in the primary?
Because you can't be nonpartisan for a candidate if you're supporting somebody who's running against your fellow Democrats.
Right. So I guess the idea is you want to get Democrats into office, and you leave it to the voters to determine which Democrats are the nominees. Once they're the nominees, then the party really swings into action to try to beat the Republican.
That's right. Now, that doesn't mean that you as an individual can't have a preference for who you want in the primary. You just can't express that preference at the polling place.
Right.
And actually stand out there and campaign for a specific candidate during the primary, only during the general election.
So we're in the late 80s. You sold off a few of your sporting goods stores. You're out of retail. Your wife is in the precinct organization. What's next for you? Why are you getting
Well,
into public service?
I had not been involved in politics up to that point, and so this is early 1990s, and she said that the Democratic Central Committee was having some problems, some financial problems, there had been a change in officers, and they didn't have anybody with business experience. Well, I go in and just take a look and see what was going on. So I did, and I wrote a report and gave a report to the chairman, which they accepted and appreciated. And then they asked me if I would run for office. There was a vacancy being created on the Central Committee. I think it was Mark Ginsburg had just been appointed by President Clinton to be the U.S. ambassador to Morocco.
Oh.
He was on the Central Committee.
Can't really run your precinct from Morocco now, can you?
A little hard. So anyway, I ran. Not being astute in politics, I didn't know that you were supposed to lobby the Central Committee members.
Yeah.
I just figured with my credentials, my background, they needed a business person. I didn't really have to do anything. Well, I learned that politics is all local. Maurice Miles, a great guy from Up County, had called all the Central Committee members, had gotten their commitments. I think I got 3 votes out of 23. So. But anyway, in the September of that year, 1994, I did go on the ballot and was elected in the primary to serve a 4-year term, which was the first of my 5 4-year terms that I served.
So you went on the ballot to become a member of the Democratic Central Committee for Montgomery County.
That's correct.
Okay, so was anyone allowed to vote for you, or only certain voters?
Well, in the primary, it's by party. In other words, if you're registered as a Democrat, you can only vote for a Democrat in the primary. If you're registered as an independent, the primary is a waste of time for you, because the only people you can vote for are people who are nonpartisan, school board and judges. You can't vote for anybody. So you really, my advice to anybody listening to this program is either register as a Democrat, hopefully, or as a Republican, so you do have a voice in the primary.
So are these rules the same across the country in Arizona, Colorado?
No, every state has their own rules.
Okay.
Some you can in a number of states, and I don't know which ones, you can cross party lines in the primary, but not in Maryland.
Right. So, like, for instance, listeners, the state of Virginia, you have an open primary, and so you can vote for any individual you want across the primary. Remember, there are 51 constitutions in the United States, 1 federal, and then 50 for each state. And then, apart from each constitution, you have parties that have their own organizational structure and foundational documents for each state. So, okay, Si, so we've gotten a little bit into the precinct organization. What I'm interested in hearing a little bit more is kind of what drove you. Why you lost and then you kept going, you kept doing it, and this is a non-remunerated position, which for our listeners means not paid. It's a volunteer position. So why would you keep going forward and doing this to yourself and giving, and what did you think it was doing to benefit the community?
Well, first of all, I felt I really could help the party, and I recognized the problems that they had. I felt that my expertise in business and finance, I had worked for a major Fortune 500 company. I had run my own company. I had run a major division of their of the conglomerate. So I really felt that I had an expertise that no one else on the committee had, and that I really could help them. And I really enjoyed, meeting the people. It gave me an opportunity to do something different. I've always enjoyed challenges, and so that's what I did. And then I was immediately elected treasurer of the organization. I served as treasurer for 18 years.
Wow. So it sounds like you identify pretty strongly as a Democrat. So how would you describe the Democratic Party, and specifically your position within the Democratic Party throughout the 90s and 2000s, as a means of advancing the public interest?
Well, I'm not quite sure exactly how to answer that question. All I can think of is the fact that the Democratic Party has always represented the progressive side of society in Montgomery County. Better education, services, honesty in politics, ethical elected officials, people that represented the diversity of the Montgomery County which certainly has changed significantly from when I was elected in 1994 to today. And the Central Committee today represents the broad sector of the Montgomery County makeup of its population, ethnically, religiously, gender-wise, and whatever. So it really is a representative body of Montgomery County who work to elect the Democrats who have the same feeling of progressive politics, progressive leadership for the county.
So what's the relationship between the Central Committee and local elected officials, both on the county level and the state level?
Well, at the local level, we are really their representative. For instance, the county has a state fair every year up in agricultural fair. They restrict how many who can be in that event. They do not allow individual candidates to have booths, but they do allow the Republican Party and the Democratic Party to have a booth. So every year, the Democratic Central Committee rents a booth, and we make that booth open to any of our elected officials who or candidates, Democratic candidates who want to campaign from that booth. That's just a small thing we do. We also fund or operate ourselves the various street fairs, the Potomac Days, the Kensington Days, where they have their parades, and we have a table there with representatives, our committee or volunteers who hand out literature about the Democratic candidates. As far as the state party, we are one of the I guess it's 23 or 24 central committees throughout the state who are under the auspices of the Maryland Democratic Party, which is located in Annapolis, Maryland.
So it's kind of a federated system where there's one central state party and then each county has its own individual federated branch.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah.
So again, back to you though. I guess I'm interested in your motivation, and we don't even have to limit this to the Democratic Party, but just in terms of public service, starting with the Maccabee Games and going over to the Democratic Party apparatus in Montgomery County. You gave a lot of yourself. You obviously were able to do well in business, and yet you took that business expertise and you tried to make it available to the Democratic Party, ostensibly to benefit the community in which you're a part. Why did you give of yourself? Why did you volunteer? Was it rewarding for you? Did you feel like it was improving, like getting people elected that were making policies that you approved of? What was was it just camaraderie? What was the driving force behind?
It's all those things. It also goes back to your family history. My grandfather, who I was named for, Simon Atlas, came to the United States from Russia, Lithuania today, to New York in 1884, was married in New York in 1887. My father was born in New York in 1890, and they moved to Washington, D.C. in 1900. My grandfather was not a wealthy man, but he was a very philanthropic man who worked to help immigrants who were coming to this country get settled. My father told me that the house that they lived in, where the FBI building is now downtown Washington, that there were always people coming in and out of their house, their apartment. They lived above the store, where they would sleep for 2 or 3 weeks until my grandfather could get them jobs and get them involved. I was born during the Depression. We didn't have a lot of money, but my father always helped people. Not only people, but he would bring stray animals in in the winter who were on the street. So you get a feeling of service, of wanting to help others. And I think that's a service or feeling that I grew up with, saw in my family. My grandfather had been lauded to me as such a wonderful man. I felt I always had something to live up to. And so I became really involved in other charities, not just the Maccabee Games. My wife, who had been very much involved in the Brandeis University National Women's Committee, though we both graduated from the University of Maryland, she became involved with Brandeis to help raise money for their libraries. I got involved with her in that. Today, I even serve on their National Executive Committee for finance for the National Committee, which is like a surrogate alumni group that supports the university. I'm involved with Mobile Medical, which is an organization that treats the indigent population of Montgomery County. I've been on that board for over 20 years. Esther Gelman called me one day and said, the Mobile Medical has a problem. United Way won't give them funding anymore because they don't have any business person on their board. Would you serve on the board? Well, more than 20 years now I've been on the board of Mobile Medical. I've been appointed to various commissions throughout the state. I served as one of the first civilian members of the Handgun Roster Board to control the sale of Saturday night specials, appointed by Governor Chafin. Served 8 years on that. Served on the Montgomery County Office of Consumer Affairs, where I was chairman for a couple of years. Served on the Montgomery County Building Licensing Board, which was also for 6 years. That was also a wonderful experience of giving back and serving the community.
Quite a variety of experiences. Sounds like it's originally coming from a sense of compassion and responsibility bestowed upon you by your father. Now, you mentioned that your son is up in Boston and your daughter is in college right now. How would you say...
My granddaughter.
Sorry, your granddaughter is what I meant to say. His daughter is in college right now. How would you say kind of how did you attempt to impart that sense of service onto the next generation or the next two generations?
Well, you can only do it by example, and I think my children have always seen that. Politically, when Ellen, early on when she was precinct chairman, we have two sons and our daughter, and she would get them out, walking the precinct with her, working on election day, giving out literature. I remember when Royce Hanson, who since passed away, was running for county executive. His wife made cookies, and they would hand out Hanson cookies to people at the polls. And so the kids learned at an early age to be involved in politics. And my son in Boston is very much involved in politics. My son in Baltimore is involved in the community. They're both very much involved in the community. My daughter works for the Hebrew Home of Greater Washington. And so our kids are all terrific, and they've grown up to be people who feel for the other people.
Interesting. And so you've had a long history in your family of giving, and I guess from handguns to athletic events to the Democratic Party, you've been able to improve the community pretty much in any way that you can, and then you were able to, through your example, impart that on to following generations.
Yeah, one of the things I also did that I'm very proud of, we had a misfortune in our family in late 1989, 1990, where my youngest first cousin came down with a rare form of leukemia and was told by the NIH that there was no treatment for it. She had about a year to live, but there was a cure if you could find a bone marrow donor. So her family, her father, Alvin Atlas, and her mother, Arlene, began a program of testing all of our family members because the best chance of finding a donor was from a related donor. They then formed an organization called Friends of Allison, which I became treasurer of, and we began running testing people to go into the National Marrow Donor Program. I went to Montreal to run tests, to Boston, to Philadelphia, Baltimore, Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia. My kids ran tests. These tests were run all over the world.
You saved lives.
And we raised 75. We tested 75,000 people in a period of 10 months, which was unheard of, because the whole national registry for donors was only 50,000 people at that time. It cost $75 for each test.
You increased it by 150%.
Yes. And we raised the money to do it.
Yeah.
And we had an amazing turnout of people who came out to put out their arm to give a little blood to be tested to see if they matched her, for people who had never met her before.
Was Allison saved?
No, she was not. We never found a donor. We were told by NIH that it was unlikely we would find a donor because there are 6 markers on your white blood cells you have to mark. One of them showed up almost exclusively in the Mongolian population. They figured Genghis Khan made his raid.
Yeah.
And that's true. That's what they said. It probably came down from the Mongols coming into Europe in the 12th, 13th century. and her mother at the near the end, who was not a perfect match. They tried a bone marrow donate with her mother, but it didn't work. The graft versus host, the rejection, and she died at the age of 23.
Oh, but have other individuals been saved by this
Hundreds
registry?
of people have had bone marrow transplants as a result of the work that we did. She testified before Congress, before the Senate with Barbara Mikulski and Senator Kennedy. They wound up appropriating money to test military people to put them in the national marrow donor base. And so it was a wonderful, sad experience, but it was really something that we will always remember.
Wow. So it sounds like there's a lot that you've gotten out of all this public service. We're nearing the end of this podcast here, so I'd like to wrap it up and ask if you have any thoughts just on a lifetime, decades and decades of giving of yourself, somewhat selflessly, and saving lives and improving the state of your community, and do you have any closing thoughts on what motivates you, or what might potentially, if a listener is listening to this, motivate a listener to follow in your footsteps?
I really haven't thought a great deal about that, other than the biblical saying, do for others as you would have others do unto you. And I definitely believe in that we're all of one nation, of one race, of one, not one race, of one nationality. We're all Americans, regardless of our race, national origins, or whatever. And that we all have to, it doesn't make any difference who you are, we have to look out for each other. And that should be the ideal that I hope will be universal at some point.
Well, you heard it from Cy Atlas, a lifelong Democratic activist who also gave much of himself to public service outside of politics. You heard that basically we're all in this thing called life together, and together we can improve things for everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for episode number 14 of Public Interest Podcast with your host, Jordan Cooper, where we interview politicians, activists, advocates, and others who seek to improve the state of the world. Thanks so much, and we'll look forward to joining you next time.